Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear students, once more. This is the second half of the first lecture that we started together about the introduction of the English literature of the 17th century. In the previous lecture, if you still remember, we explained that part about the Puritan age or the age of Milton, and it started in 1600 till 1660. Now let's move to the second lecture. The second lecture, or the second half of the introduction about the English literature of the 17th century. We have here what we called the Restoration period. The first one was the Puritan period. This is the first period, the first division of the 17th literature. This is the second division, or the second period, and as you can see, the date here, it started in 1660, which means the end of the first period. The first period, if you still remember, started in 1600 till 1660. But this one starting now from the end of the first period, the Puritan period, started in 1660 till 1700. Okay? Now, after the Restoration in 1660, when Charles II came to throne, there was a complete repudiation of the Puritan ideals. Remember, in the first period, we call it the Puritan period. Why? Because the ideas of the Puritans at that time, these ideas were dominating and prevailing among people, and many people believed in these ideas. Now, at the end of this period, in 1660, the case is different. The situation is different here. How? All these, as you can see the arrow here, all these Puritan ideals and Puritan ideas also, now they were complete refusal and non-acceptance. They do not accept these Puritan ideals, and of course the way of living of the Puritans at that time. In English literature, the period from 1660 to 1700 is called the period of Restoration. And of course now, I'm quite sure now when you see these bold words, definitely you will remember what I did at the end of the lecture. In the previous lecture, I wrote some words in bold and underlined them, because some questions at the end will be about this part. So now, of course, you remember what I did last time. So expect a question to be about this line, inshallah, at the end of the lecture. So in English literature, let me repeat this sentence because it is important. In English literature, the period from 1660 to 1700 is called the period of Restoration. So the first, in the previous lecture, we got the Puritan period. Now, this period starting from 1660 to 1700 is called what we call the Restoration. And why do we call it Restoration? Of course, you know the word restore. Restore means to get something back, to regain it. And that's why we call it Restoration. Why do we call it Restoration? Because monarchy I'm sure you know the meaning of the word monarchy. Because monarchy restored in England. Now England again was under the monarchy. And Charles II, who is Charles II? He is, as it is written in front of you, he is the son of Charles I, who had been defeated. His father, Charles I, had been defeated and beheaded. This person, Charles II, who was the son of Charles I, he came back, as it is written here in front of you, he came back to England from his exile in France. He was living in France as an exile, and again he became the king of England at that time. And of course, if this person, when he became the king, definitely he will be completely against the Puritan ideals, because he hated these ideals and these ideas, because they were the main reason for what's written here, for the defeat and the beheading of his father. So expect Charles II, the king, to be completely against all the ideas of the Puritans at that time. Okay, now let's move please to the second slide. But before moving to the second slide, I'd like you to remember this, that the English literature at that time, this period from 1660 to 1700, is called the period of restoration. And to know the reason why do we call it restoration, because of the monarchy restored again to England. Let's move to the second slide. As the Puritan period was called the Age of Milton, now this second division of the English literature of the 17th, this second half is called either the Restoration period or the Age of Dryden. Why? We said that the reason in the first place, we said that it was the Age of Milton because he was the most representative of that age. Again, it's the same here for Dryden. It is called the Age of Dryden. We call it the Age of Dryden because Dryden was the dominating and most representative literary figure of the age. He was the most, again, he was the dominating and most representative literary figure of the age. So the two most important representative of the two periods, Milton was the most important representative of the first period, the Puritan period, and the Dryden here is the most representative dramatist and writer of the second period, which is the Restoration period. Remember these two names, because these two names are the prominence for these ages. So the literature of the Restoration period emphasized directness and simplicity of expression, counteracted the tendency of exaggeration and extravagance which was encouraged during the Elizabethan and the Puritan ages. So the exaggeration and extravagance, which means that they try to exaggerate in their expressions and in their words, either in drama, either in poetry. They use these big words, as a kind of exaggerations, as a kind of extravagance. But this period, no, they did something else, which actually characterized their literature. The literature, I mean the Restoration period literature, which is their style of writing was direct and simple. And as it is written here, the literature of the Restoration period emphasized directness and simplicity of expressions. So they focused on these two characteristics in their writing and in their expressions. These two characteristics are directness, they should be direct, and at the same time they should be simple. Okay, now let's move please to the second chapter. So instead of using grandiloquent phrases, again exaggerated phrases, involved sentences full of Latin quotations and classical allusions. Of course, this is what happened during the Elizabethan drama. The Restoration writers gave emphasis to reasoning rather than romantic fancy. So they tended to focus on reason, and instead of giving you these romantic fancy and these romantic ideas, of course, which are not suitable in their opinion to that age, and evolved an exact, precise way of writing, consisting of short, clear-cut sentences without any unnecessary words. So they didn't use words which they felt that these words are not necessary in their writings. So they preferred to be away from any exaggerated, any extravagance that is not needed in their writing, and these words which are just giving meanings higher to the audience and to the readers. So again, they preferred consisting of short, clear-cut sentences without any unnecessary word. Now let's move to the next. Now, as we displayed the three genres of the Puritan age, the poetry, the drama, the prose, now we are doing the same here with the second half of the 17th century literature. We start with the Restoration period. We start with the poetry. The poetry, how was the poetry in Restoration period? John Dryden, the Restoration period was mostly satirical, realistic, and written in the heroic couplet, of which Dryden was the supreme master. So remember that Dryden was the most important poet during that time. He was, and this is an important sentence, he was the dominating figure of the Restoration period. He was the dominating figure of the Restoration period, and he made his marks in the fields of poetry, drama, and prose. This is very important, which means that Dryden was not confined only to one genre of literature, only wrote something in poetry or in drama or in prose, but he could, as it is written in front of you, he made his marks in the fields, not just one field, but in the fields of poetry, in the field of drama, and also in the field of prose. Okay, now let's move to the next one. The poetry of Dryden can be conveniently divided under three heads, and this is you need also to bear in mind this division of the poetry of Dryden. So again, the poetry of Dryden can be conveniently divided under three heads, under three headings, under three titles. The first one is the political satires. So he was against these political events that were happening during his age. So he wrote some political satires, and of course you should know the meaning of the word satires, which is satirizing and which is criticizing these political conditions in which he and his people were living in at that time. Again, the second head is the doctrinal poems and the fables. The doctrinal poems and the fables. These are the three heads which the poetry of Dryden can be divided into. Again, another important sentence is that the poetry of Dryden possesses all the characteristics of the Restoration period, and therefore thoroughly representative of that age. And this is, of course, why we are asserting and emphasizing every now and then that Dryden was the most important figure and representative of the Restoration period. Why? Because in his writings, in his poems and his other writings, his poetry has all these characteristics of this period, the Restoration period. And it does not have the poetic glow, the spiritual fervor, the moral loftiness, and the philosophical depth. So which means that, again, he is concentrating on the directness and simplicity of his poetry, not just using these moral loftiness, these spiritual fervor, these philosophical depth, which of course may not be understood to the people. So he preferred to be direct and to be simple when he is writing this. Okay, now let's move to the second genre, which is the Restoration drama. Okay, as we have just mentioned something about the poetry, Restoration poetry. Now we need to mention something about the Restoration drama. In 1642, the theaters were closed, and remember who was responsible for the closure of the theaters. Of course, you know, they were the Puritans, right? So in 1642, the theaters were closed by the authority of the Parliament, which was dominated by Puritans. And so no good plays were written from 1642 till the Restoration period, which started in 1660. Because of that closure of the theaters, definitely no writer, no dramatist would write a play, because he knew that what's the benefit behind writing a play if it is not going to be displayed in front of the audience, or the people will see that play. So because of that closure of the theaters, the dramatist preferred not to write any of the plays at that time. Okay, so I read this once more. In 1642, 42, the theaters were closed by the authority of the Parliament, which was dominated by Puritans. And so no good plays were written from 1642 till the Restoration period, which is 1660. During the Restoration period, the emphasis was on prose as the medium of expression. So the only genre, the only means, the only medium of expression at that time that got some attention and some care by the people is the prose, and not, of course, the poetry or the drama. Okay, now let's move to the next one. As the common people at that time, they still under the influence of Puritanism. Still, they couldn't escape these ideas and ideals of Puritanism. Still, the people at that time, the common people, they were still at that time under the influence of the Puritanism. And that's why they had no love for the theaters. So they were affected by the ideas of the Puritanism, and they didn't love going to the theater at that time. So because of this, the dramatists had to cater to the taste of aristocratic class. So these few dramatists who were writing some dramatic works, they directed their dramas to whom? To the aristocratic level of people, to the first class people. Why? Because the common people, the middle class people, those people, they did not like going to the theaters. Why? Because they were still affected and influenced by the ideas of the Puritanism at that time. So those few dramatists who wrote some of their dramas, they wrote it for that people, for that level of people, those who are aristocratic people. So the dramatist had to cater to the taste of aristocratic class, which was highly fashionable. So of course it was highly fashionable, frivolous, cynical, and sophisticated. Of course, because they were writing to the aristocratic people. The Restoration drama was confined to the upper strata of society, whose taste was aristocratic. I'd like you to remember this, because it's very important, because the dramatists at that time, they limit and confine themselves only to the aristocratic level of people. And of course, this is not a healthy characteristic. This is not a good feature or quality of the Restoration drama. Because usually, if you want something to be successful, if you want something to be well known and popular, you write to all the people, not you choose one level and you start writing too, right? Because, and especially those dramatists, all these successful and well-known works of the dramatists, of course, they are successful because they were written deliberately to the common people. Because, you know, the middle class people, those are the majority in any society, and the aristocratic people a little bit few, the lower class people are a little bit few. Okay, so this means that because of this, the dramatists of the Restoration period, they only directed themselves to the writing of the aristocratic level. Why? Because of the reason mentioned before, that the people, the common people, the majority of the people, the middle class people, still were affected by the Puritanism, the ideas of the Puritanism, and of course they did not prefer to go to the theaters. Okay, so again, the last sentence is very important. The Restoration drama, and of course drama here means that the dramatists was confined to the upper aristocratic, the upper strata of society, whose taste was aristocratic, right? So maybe if one of the common people reads this work that is directed to the aristocratic, he may not be able to understand what is written at the time. Okay, now let's move to the next slide. Comedy of manners. Comedy of manners. In it, there are two groups of characters. So, of course, this point is related to the Restoration drama. We have a type of comedy which we call comedy of manners. And in it, in that comedy of manners that appeared during the Restoration period, there are two groups of characters. Two groups of characters. The wits, who claim our sympathy, and the gulls, or the dull ones, who arouse our laughter. So we have the gulls, and also we have what we call the wits. The wits claim our sympathy. The gulls, they arouse our laughter. The end is not the victory of the good over the evil. Usually in that type of comedy, in that type of drama, it is not necessary that the victory of the good over the evil, but the witty over the stupid. So, as we said, that they are preferring that reasoning in literature. So, usually the witty, the smart, the intelligent usually wins, has the evil, the witty over the stupid. Okay, the comedy of manners was the most popular form of drama. At that time, it was the most popular form of drama, which portrayed the sophisticated life of, again, class of society. Okay, the dominant class of society. Okay, now another important name that you need to remember is Congreve. Congreve is put at the head of the Restoration drama. So when we are talking about Restoration drama, we need to remember Congreve as a great writer at that time. As the plays of Congreve reflect the fashions and fables of the upper classes, whose moral standards, again the same idea. Congreve was one of the dramatists who wrote only for the aristocratic level. Okay? As the play of Congreve reflect the fashions and fables of the upper classes, whose moral standards had become lax, they do not have a universal appeal. Why? Because his drama was written for the aristocratic people. But the benefit or the value of the plays of Congreve, but as a social documents, their value is great. They are like social documents, recording and telling you all the details how those aristocratic people were living at that time. Okay, now in tragedy, the Restoration period, specialized in heroic tragedy. Heroic tragedy. This kind of also heroic tragedy. What is heroic tragedy? Which dealt with themes of epic magnitude. Themes of epic magnitude. The heroes and the heroines possessed superhuman qualities. So that's why we call it heroic tragedies. Because the heroes and heroines in these plays, in this tragedy, in heroic tragedy, they have superhuman qualities. The purpose of this tragedy, the purpose of the heroic tragedy, was didactic. Didactic means giving you lessons, giving you some lessons to learn from, to inculcate virtues in the shape of bravery and conjugal love. So giving you some lessons to teach you some lessons about bravery, about honesty, and all these characteristics which need to be learned. Okay. Now, the chief protagonist and writer of the heroic tragedy was Dryden. Again, Dryden was the most important dramatist who wrote this. Under his leadership, the heroic tragedy dominated the stage. Heroic tragedy, because of Dryden, this type of tragedy, they dominated the stage from 1660 to 1678. His first experiment in this type of drama was his play Tyrannic Love. So you need to pay attention to this. So Tyrannic Love was the first experience of Dryden in such type of drama, which is the heroic tragedy. Okay, now also Dryden gives up the literary rules observed by French dramatists and follows the laws of drama formulated by the great dramatist of England. Another important way in which Dryden turns himself away from the conventions of the heroic tragedy is that he does not give a happy ending to the play. It is not necessary when you read any of the plays of Dryden to have a happy ending, and this is what we are going, inshallah, to see when we study together his valuable and interesting play, All for Love. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. The next point. Now we are talking about the third type of literature genre, which is the Restoration prose. The Restoration period was deficient in poetry and in drama. As we said, there was not that flourishing in drama and in poetry. But in prose, the case is different. In prose, it holds its head much higher. There was much care to prose than to drama. It was during the Restoration period that English prose was developed as a medium for expressing clearly and precisely average ideas and feelings about miscellaneous matters for which prose is really meant. Okay, so the main idea here is that prose was luckier and has had much care than drama and poetry, of course. Okay, next, Dryden presented a model of the new prose. He wrote in a plain, simple, and exact style, free from all exaggerations. Again, remember two important words: directness and simplicity. His fables and the preface to them are fine examples of the prose style which Dryden was introducing. Okay, now Other writers of the period who came under the influence of Dryden, that there are some writers appeared at that time, and they were, because of the influence of Dryden on them, these also their styles were simple but precise style. Where Sir William Temple, we have John Tolston, and we have also George Savile. These three people, they were highly affected and influenced by the style of Dryden in writing. Okay, now let's see again some question samples to what we have. As you can see on the screen, in English literature, the period from 1660 to 1700 is called the period of. We have four choices. We have speculation, we have decoration, we have restoration, and we have also information. Of course, if you go to the first, slide, if you go to the first slide, you will have it clearly here. The question is quite clear. In English literature, the period from 1600 to 1660 to 1700 is called, of course, it's quite clear here and in bold, it is the period of restoration. Okay, so this is the answer to the first questions. Okay, now let's move to the next question. In English literature, the period, this is the one. Okay, now let's move to this. The restoration period is called the age of, because he was the dominating figure of the age. And of course, giving you here we have Dryden, we have Wordsworth, we have Shaw, and we have Congreve. Of course, if you go again to this, the restoration period is called the age of. If you go again to this, it is called the age of Dryden. So the restoration period, here we have, he is called it is the age of Dryden, as you can see. So the answer to the second question that you have here is that the restoration period is called the age of whom? The age of course, the right choice here is Dryden, because he was the dominating figure of the age. Okay, so as you can see, the questions are very simple, not that difficult. What you need is to read the materials that you have in front of you, to understand, to read it more than once in order to remember what is there in these materials. Okay, I have already finished. Thank you very much for listening attentively to my lectures. All the best to all of you. Inshallah, we will meet next time. Inshallah, find you having all the pleasures and all the happiness. Thank you very much. See you, inshallah, next lecture. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.